We will be commencing the Board of Education meeting November 21st, 2017, so at Sarah Noble Intermediate School, 7:30. If you would join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you. Okay, the first portion of our meeting this evening will be the recognition of students and staff and various others. And with that, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. We'll start tonight with two student recognitions. I see one student here. We had two students who were National Merit Program commended students, and that means of the 1.5 million high school students that took the PSAT, 3.3% of them, or 50,000 out of 1.5 million, scored high enough to be recognized as a commended scholar. And so the first student is Mr. Joseph Alexander. Congratulations. And then we have Jeffrey Slyer. He was able to make it tonight. But also, I mean, 1 in 50,000 sounds like 1 in a lot, but out of 1.5 million, that's pretty good. We had 2 of them, so and then this month's stars, and I'll give an extra thank you to the recognized staff that came out tonight, because technically their Thanksgiving break started at like 3:30 today, so I appreciate you coming out on your break. I wish you luck and hope you drive home in a brand new car. We had 2 staff members that couldn't make it tonight. The first is Miss Jenny Cox, who teaches at New Milford High School. I'm nominating this staff member because she goes to great lengths to help and converse with students. I was in her advisory class. One time I was talking to her about a book. Some parts of the book seemed vague, and so she said she would read it so that we could talk about it next time. And that really made an impression on me. So to Ms. Cox, I say thank you, and I really appreciate when students nominate teachers. And so Ms. Judy Grosenbacher from Northville Elementary School. Ms. Grosenbacher works with my son at Northville. She greets him with a smile each morning and ensures that regardless of any difficulty he may face, she still treats him with respect and kindness. As a mom, she calms my fears and worries by showing me how much she cares. And so that's Miss Judy Grosenbacher from Northville. Yes, you have to come up. We won't embarrass you too much, but it's nice when parents nominate. Miss Holland from Sarah Noble couldn't be here tonight, but about Miss Holland, she's a stellar teacher and supportive colleague. She always has a wealth of great ideas and strategies. I'm always impressed by her professionalism and dedication to students and the community. Conversations with her about teaching and learning have made me a better educator, and I appreciate her every day. So that's Miss Holland at Sarah Noble. And I can embarrass Mr. Rodriguez here. Besides his job in grounds, Al is often called to help out with setting up or moving equipment or furniture in schools and central office. He does whatever is asked efficiently, cheerfully, and most importantly with a smile. And so Al, congratulations. From Scotticoke, Miss Barbara Morris. Barbara always has a positive attitude and is a wonderful addition to our school community. She plans lessons with all students in mind, accommodating instruction and creativity and flexible grouping, and is cognizant of teaching students how to live a healthy lifestyle. So congratulations, Miss Morris. And the last one is a little interesting, so she almost gets two nominations. Ms. Tizzoli, who was nominated from Hill and Plain, but then she transferred to Northville, so we're counting her as Hill and Plain tonight, even though she currently teaches at Northville. And Ms. Tizzoli has such a positive impact on her students. She's a gift. So, thank you. Come on up, Jen. We're gonna have some. Oh, that's excellent.
No, don't worry about it. Congratulations.
All right, so this month we have a festive holiday plate for them to pick. So we're gonna do this. You're gonna pick one, and I'm gonna pick one, and you can be Mrs. Holland.
Oh, I don't get the car?
Well, no. If you win it, you're winning it for Mrs. Holland. And so this is Miss Scott's, it's not mine. Jenny Cox, good luck to you.
If I get it, could I get a job as an Uber driver?
All right, on
No, that might be in the
three.
fine print on
One,
three.
2, and go.
All right. So somebody should have a little sticker on the inside.
Oh, it's just.
So that's you.
There you go. So you keep that, 'cause there's a pin in there for you. That's yours. So that you can remember forever that you were selected. Then we have supporting gifts for you as this is your swag pile. I'll talk to you in a minute about the envelope and how you go about getting it. And the rest of you, thank you very much for the work that you do every day to support our students.
Thank you.
Now, one more.
Okay, mixed emotions, but David, would you come up, your last board meeting? Mr. Littlefield will be leaving the Board of Education, but I'm very happy to report he will still be doing public service, zoning board of appeals. He was voted in a couple weeks ago and will be continuing with his public service. David, for several years, was very instrumental in the facilities restructure when you were on the committee there, restructuring that committee. Many of the things we still, we incorporate them as we speak. And I want to thank you for that. With this curriculum work, particularly with gifted and talented, keep that program going. So very instrumental, and we'll miss you. We'll miss you. Yes. Please accept this to kind of keep time with things. I know you're going on. I know you're going on to other projects that I know have been brewing in the back of your mind for a while. So my best to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, at this point, we have some goodies up here for everybody, so please join us. We'll take a short recess. back to our agenda. Public comment.
Yes, Mr. Pete Martinez.
Hi, good evening. Pete Martinez. I currently live in Gaylordsville, 493 River Road. I was told I had to say that. I came here today to kind of express a few concerns that I have. And it's not, the sky is falling at all. The concerns are not great, but enough for me to come here to kind of express some of my thoughts. I have a son that's currently in the high school. I've had two that have graduated and had a really good experience through going through Milford High School especially. The reason why I'm here is to kind of express my concern. My son, who is currently a sophomore, had texted me throughout the day, and if you understand teenagers, and many of you do, they don't ever text their parent at all. And my son texted me because there was a day which used to, I think traditionally, my other sons have had a fairly good time. So USA Day, I think it was called, where students come and dress in their red, white, and blue and kind of express their patriotism. On this day, my son was seemingly upset because there was a few students that were going through the school with Confederate flags, and it was a little bit disheartening because my son never ever was concerned about his safety. And at one point I called him back and I said, "Are you okay?" And the first thing that he said was, "Yes, I'm okay. I'm with my friends," which meant to me that he didn't feel safe because he had to attach that he was with his friends. Now, I know Mr. Shagru. I know he's an awesome principal, and he doesn't condone this kind of behavior in the school. And I know that he was, as I was speaking, the situation was being handled. So I guess I don't want to harp on that day at all, but and I know that there's been ways that the high school, I think, is kind of handling this problem of these students with Confederate flags, and there's an overall tone, I think, in the high school that's become more pervasive, where students, I think, feel a little bit more emboldened about their actions. I know that recently at the high school there have been kind of a diversity kind of days where kids can kind of express their feelings about what's going on with current issues as it relates to race and so on. I guess I'm really concerned that we aren't doing enough. I know some teachers at the high school, because I'm a teacher myself. I teach in the Bedford Central School District in Westchester. And there seems to be a fear by teachers that they don't want to talk about race. They don't want to speak about some challenging things. There's a little bit of fear to do that. And I feel like if we are going to help our students to become citizens, global citizens of this world, we need to have those conversations in class. We have to allow students to express themselves in a very tactful way. I think the political discourse outside, as you know, is not very good. I think we need to help our students in the classroom understand how to listen to each other and talk to each other. I feel like that we need to kind of empower teachers to do that, to navigate that discussion in the classroom, and not be fearful of it. And the reason why I say that they're fearful is because I just, and maybe fearful is not the word, but they're very cautious in how they want to have that conversation. And I think we have to give them that flexibility and trust them to have that conversation in the classroom. So, you know, outside of in New Milford, you probably know of some incidents that have happened, spray painting on one of my friend's restaurant with the N-word on it. I feel like it's the community, it's our job, right? And I think it's part of the board's job to kind of bridge that gap between the community and the school, and help students understand that that is not acceptable, and that's intolerable. So I didn't mean this to be like a passionate speech or anything like that, but I feel like it is necessary for us to begin that conversation and help our students in the classroom. With that, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, although it's very regretful on many levels. Any other public comment? Okay, PTO. Mrs. Lewis.
Good evening. The PTOs have sponsored some fun events for the students this past month. SNIS held a game night where students had an opportunity to learn some new games, and 10 winners brought home a game. Northville sponsored their Spooktacular, where they had games, a photo booth, and haunted courtyard, while Hill and Plain held trick-or-treating night, where students received a map to direct them through the school to games and little prizes. Some new events that students can look forward to are a dance at the Scattercoat for 7th and 8th graders, which will be held right after school in December, as well as Star Wars movie event, The Last Jedi at Bank Street on December 16th. The high school PTO is working with Mrs. Stiles, the high school librarian, to round up donations to promote Passport to Reading program. It is conference time again, and that also means that the K through 8 schools will be promoting their scholastic book fairs with family events planned for K through 5 schools. The book fairs are a staple, and it is a great event that promotes reading and helps provide books for the schools. December spirit theme is Ugly Sweater, and the PTO would like to thank Mr. Littlefield for his hard work and good luck in the future, and to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you. And our student representatives, you all set?
Good evening, everyone. To start off, this past Friday, the Spanish Honor Society held their annual talent show, which is always a big hit. I wasn't able to make it with you.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, a lot of singing acts this year, but they were all very good. The Dramatics Club is working on their December show. The show dates are December 7th and 8th, and it's coming together. I'm really happy with it so far.
So on Thursday, Thanksgiving morning at 3 a.m., the band is departing for Los Angeles, California. On Sunday, they'll be recording the parade, the Hollywood Christmas Parade, and you might want to write this down. It is on, this is a plug from Mr. Sizdak, on December 15th at 8 p.m. on the CW. The parade will be airing on national television, so please take a look, and hopefully I'll be looking good because I'm in the front row.
Yesterday, Mr. Armenta held the informational meeting for Curtains, this year's all-school musical. Many kids showed up and we're really excited to see how it turns out. Students are required to submit and pay for their AP exams by December 1st in order to get college credit for their courses.
Senior nights have been going on for fall sports, and as we speak right now, the varsity Green Wave football team is facing New Fairfield, so let's hope that's going well right now.
And winter sports begin December 2nd.
Also, the freshman and sophomore classes had an assembly addressing sexual harassment. That was yesterday.
Today, the German Honor Society gave out Thanksgiving flowers, in classes, so.
And last but not least, the National Honor Society held our annual Thanksgiving food drive. And this year, more than ever, it was a huge success. All of our National Honor Society teams brought in way more than expected, and everyone contributed. We had to get a little extra help bringing all the food over to the food drive, but it was a huge success, and hopefully that brings a lot of joy to everyone on Thanksgiving. And happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you too.
We'll move on to item 6. I need a motion to approve the following Board of Education minutes, workshop minutes, October 17th, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor? And thank you. And secondly, I need a motion to approve the following Board of Education minutes, regular meeting, October 17, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor? And thank you. And next, item 7, Superintendent's Report.
All right, so we have the good, the bad, and the ugly, so I figured, I'm not sure which order I'm going to go in. Maybe you can tell me afterwards. We'll start with, we had a hot water heater fail at Scotticoke.
Good. I just wanted what order you're pulling.
I'm not sure yet. So I want to put a commendation out. So that means today, the cafeteria staff had to scramble to make sure that they had hot water. And lo and behold, this is the day that the health inspector decided to visit, because that is the world we live in. What are the chances, right? The good news is that the work that the cafeteria staff did to address the needs that were immediate, the health inspector came in, was happy with how they adjusted, and they still scored a 100 perfect score on their health inspection. So absolutely, Mrs. Sullivan did a great job kind of adjusting. We special ordered and rushed a new hot water heater that will be here Monday. So Monday after Thanksgiving break, the cafeteria staff has come up with a plan where they're going to prepare everything at Northville, move it over to Scotticoke for the lunches there, and then by the end of the day, Monday, Kevin is telling me that we will have the new hot water heater installed. He's a man of his word. He's going to come in under budget and ahead of time. And yes, and the cost we estimate is between $10,000 and $11,000 for that hot water heater. So we will see that in a transfer, because we do not have an account right now that will absorb that cost in its entirety and not deplete a building. So that is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Also, in our good, bad, and ugly report, the high school received the Michaels Cup Award, which is a pretty nice award from the CAC around sportsmanship and being a class act school. And that ties into some of the work we're doing around PBIS and positive behavior, not just for athletes. It's an initiative, K-12, the administrators and teachers went through some training this week. It's tied to kind of that sense of belonging that we talked about as a lens. And so I want to, even with the public comment tonight, I think those are things that are resonating within our buildings, not just among administrators and teachers, but students of all levels. And so if the students are a part of that, then it's going to take off and it will be accepted. They have to police each other, and we don't want necessarily people policing as much as we want. This is the standard of acceptance, and this is how we operate. And that Michaels Award within the athletics kind of exemplifies some of that work happening. Connected to that, both the middle and high school sent out letters to parents on the dangers of using vaping tobacco products. That is another conversation that's happening. It'll come up later in policy as well. Again, not just a community conversation or administrative one, but one that we want families and schools to engage in together. The state of Connecticut, and it wasn't enough to cut us as a part of the budget. The governor announced on Friday holdbacks, which is basically, we allocated the money to you, but we're not giving it to you. We're holding it back because we need it for other purposes. To the town of New Milford, that's about $1.7 million in 17-18 money. That's this year's money that they will not be sending to New Milford. In addition, yesterday and today. Some of the speculation around the excess cost funding, which is the offset for special ed, is also kind of not officially been put out there yet, other than kind of foreshadowing that that may be another lever that the state decides to pull before the end of the year. And so those are real concerns that we have right now. Anthony and I talk regularly about where our contribution. The kind of short answer is that the excess cost money is directly in our revenue lines of our budget. That's the $750,000 that we budgeted on the last page of our budget book. That may come in less than that. The excess cost, although tied to education, is in the town's revenue account. And so that is something that collaboratively we will work on with the town, because at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers of this community that are being unfunded by Hartford, and, you know, we all should share in mitigating that effect. And to that point, Mr. Lawson and I met with the mayor-elect yesterday for a short meeting, really to open lines of communication, to welcome him to the position, and to offer our partnership into making our relationship with the town successful and open. And teachers and students started their Thanksgiving break today, so I hope that all of you will be able to start it relatively soon, and wish you a good break.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you know, we're right in the middle of our budget preparations and things of that nature. Please feel free to forward any of your suggestions to the superintendent. However, please understand, it's his budget, so don't be slighted if it's not in there, but we comprehensively review it in January. With that being said, a short meeting with the mayor-elect? I don't know what you determine short, but we had a...
Ask them.
Yeah, oh. But we had a very, very pleasant meeting with the mayor-elect. We went over a variety of things, sharing with him the facilities 5-year plan, the curriculum 5-year plan, the ADA audit for the E Street, these types of things. And definitely to work in a partnership, well, now with two things. One, the budget itself, which we will hopefully have a meeting prior to the development of those and see where everybody's at. And this $1.7 million that Mr. Smith mentioned in his report, didn't really expect that one. And there's no doubt about that. There will have to be collaboration on that as well. I mean, our sticking point is, our problem is that we don't have a contingency fund, but we can look at efficiencies and other things that, well, we'll just have to. So that's going to be something. We also spoke about the strategic plan that we've had that we'd like to get going to address some of these things, as well as speaking about adult ed and continuing education. And we also had a brief discussion on alternative high school, things of these nature. And it was very good back and forth, and we look forward to coming to conclusions on some of these financial things so that we can move ahead. Okay, and that's about it. Now, okay. Moving on to the committee and reports. Facilities, sir.
Oh, sure. We had a very productive meeting at the last facilities meeting. The big topic of discussion, which is the last thing on today's agenda, it was the Lillis Building ADA report and prioritization. So I think what we're looking for tonight is to get some where the board needs to focus with that. And we also, I think something which was really helpful, and I saw it also in the operations, was that there were some budget drivers that were discussed as far as some projects like that have to happen in the next budget, like asbestos testing and asphalt repair and playground safety, and that was all very informative and important stuff that we need to talk about and be aware of when we talk about the budget.
Okay, thank you. Operations?
Oh, yes, we had a presentation by Source for Teachers, we had an update, so we appreciate that. Going through our substitute fill rate, obviously trying to get those numbers up, and that was a program that we entered into. This is new for us, so we appreciate the update and the goal of getting those numbers up, and we'll have further information at another time brought forward. We have a couple of stipend requests in here, and then, as usual, we have our monthly reports. We have a revised Exhibit A, I believe, yep, and Ms. Baldelli, thank you for sending the list of our open vacancies that we requested at operations. That should have been attached. Everyone has a copy of that. And for discussion and not for action, we had an update on our transportation complaints, just to bring the board up to speed as to how that process works, how many we had last year. There was an update on that versus this year, and how those complaints are handled. We had an information of our substitute list, which is brought to the board periodically, of our list of all of our substitutes. We also had on the agenda for an item of information, which is also attached to the board, was the agreement with the New Milford Board and the NMEA, which I can discuss briefly under negotiations. Just to do a quick recap of that. As Brian had stated, we had budget drivers, which is the time to bring those forward. I appreciate that, some of those discussions, just to see where we're going. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Well, exhausted so far.
Sorry, I know I kind of.
And policy.
Thanks, Mr. Lawson. You'll see for policy, I want to thank Bill Dahl for stepping in there to fill in as an alternate.
Thanks, Bill.
November 7th was an important day, I guess, so.
Couldn't be there.
Missed a couple, but we had another nice discussion here about the distribution of materials. What we're going to do is bring that back with some clarification and language for our next policy subcommittee. So you'll see that in the minutes. You'll also see kind of a catch-all smoking, drugs, alcohol, tobacco policies. I have to say that I'm always very impressed with how well-written these policies are. And so much so that we take a look at something like vaping technology, which has advanced just dramatically in the past few years, that we have opportunities to use existing language, no changes in language, and essentially through kind of interpretation of what our policy is, and make that a little bit more public. So that's actually, the first step was to bring that through policy subcommittee, and tonight we'll have a discussion for items of information to talk about kind of that reinterpretation and re-envision how we interpret what our policy is. So I think it's important to note, there's not a change in policy, but a reinterpretation of how we will enact that policy. And I have to also then say too, I appreciate as well the possible budget drivers. It's really interesting to kind of look through the minutes on all the subcommittees to see these ideas that are out there. So we all have a sense for, okay, this could be a budget driver here, here, and here. And the one we really got an opportunity to talk at some brevity was the expulsion legislation. And again, we're always waiting on the state. And, maybe in December we'll hear something more, and that could be a budget driver. And also the high school reform, but then again, that could always just be the can that continues to get kicked down the road. So that's about all I have for policy. Thank you.
Thank you. And Committee on Learning.
We had a great meeting. Our Project Lead the Way Engineering, Design, and Development class presented their capstone project ideas. Not the finished project, that doesn't come until later on in the semester, but basically their ideas where they needed to scope out a problem, they needed to research it, find similar products that are out there that have patents, and try to come up with their own idea of how to solve that problem. And so I think there were about 5 different groups that came and presented, and it's always so nice to see our students in action. And it was an awesome presentation. Their prototypes will be presented, hopefully, if they're finished, at the Connecticut Science Fair in March. And then they will be having a final presentation in May, and we have asked if we could please be invited, because it would really be nice to see how these have come to fruition. So that was really, really nice. We do have a couple of curricula on tonight's agenda. One is Conversational Spanish 1 and then Conversational Spanish 2. These courses were piloted last year for grades 7th and 8th, and the courses focus on real-life applications and day-to-day life versus the more traditional formal study of the language. It was very interesting. It was very interesting to learn about how they're teaching this and how the kids are grasping onto this type of training of language versus the more traditional approach. So that was very interesting, so we'll see that later on. And like all the other committees, we did have a budget driver discussion related to curriculum. It included intervention support, curriculum mapping, and Tier 1 instructional support. And I have to say, I love the idea of bringing these to the committees because, pretty soon we'll be jumping into budget season, and it's a good projection for us to know what's going to be in the budget and what we need to be prepared for. So that's my report, and thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. And Brian, Ed Advance?
It was dinner.
Dinner was great. It was a very interesting meeting. Ed Advance has now just leased a couple buildings in Torrington. They have a one-year lease with St. Peter's, and they've used that to expand their access program, but also their expelled student program, which they presented, which was very interesting. And with that program, the students come in for about 10 to 15 hours a week. They do most of the work online, but they get to go into Torrington and talk with the teacher regarding their online work and get assistance with it. And it seems like that'll be a good program for them, especially with the new expelled student legislature coming along down the pipe, whatever that may be. They also presented that the Yukon property came through. They and
Wow.
yeah, so
That's
they
great.
yeah, and with that Yukon property, they've decided that they're not going to, now that they have St. Peter's and Yukon property, that they're not going to use it for the access program, but they're going to focus primarily on Head Start and Adult Ed. And that's a large campus, and there's lots of room for growth for Ed Advance, and that seems like a pretty exciting project. And just the other day, I got in the mail just information on how Ed Advance, New Milford uses Ed Advance, and I think that's very important. I don't think a lot of people know a whole lot about Ed Advance, so if you don't mind, I'll go over a couple of the areas. They do a lot of adult and community service, or we use them a lot for adult and community service, with the Foothills Adult and Continuing Education Program, individual day supports, the Para-Pro exam, supported living services. It's just, in Title V Older Worker Program, this Ed Advance, New Milford definitely benefits from Ed Advance in these areas. And just academically, the early childhood program, they have an autism program that we use. Head Start, of course, which just the numbers we have gone down, but they still have a Head Start program in, I believe, Hill and Plain? Two. Oh, okay, I thought we were going to only have one this year. Right. So it's just this, not a lot of people, these CRUC programs provide a lot of services for schools that would cost us a lot of money if we were to do them ourselves, and they're very valuable for the community. So I just thought I'd highlight them. They also, there's obviously the Access program where we have 2 students in, and they're expanding that program. So it's all good, very interesting stuff.
Thank you. Mr. Capola's not here tonight, so we'll move CABE to our next meeting in negotiations.
Okay, thank you. We had negotiations did finalize we had in a stipulated arbitrated agreement with the teachers. Each member has been given a copy through operations, and this evening of some of the particulars of the contract. Basically, it's a 3-year contract with a 1-year reopener after the first year of salary. I'd like to take an opportunity, the process begins in June. We just ended it in September. It's a long process. It's a lot of hard work. Ms. Baldelli, Anthony, Mr. Smith, Mr. Dahl, Mr. Shem, Mr. Capola, and myself served on the committee, and it's a tremendous commitment, but well worth it. We are very, very pleased. The overall increase to salary for the 1 year is 2.2, with an insurance offset making it possibly a net increase of 1.5. Is that about right? Yes. And we kept our insurance, making some increases in increment there, and we are extremely pleased that we were able to come to this agreement, and very grateful that for all the time served on this. So the contract is there for everyone to see, and that is the rest of our negotiations.
Okay,
That's it.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the magnet school.
Sorry, no,
I should have taken that.
Very well, then. Okay, moving up to item 10, discussion and possible action. I need a motion to approve Exhibit A, personnel certified, non-certified appointments, resignations, and leaves of absence as of November 21st, 2017.
So moved?
Second.
And discussion. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and B, monthly reports. I need a motion to approve monthly reports, budget position dated October 31st, 2017, purchase resolution D 704, and request for budget transfers.
So moved.
Second.
And discussion. Give you a chance to look at that.
I'd just like to make a comment, if I could.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate over the last year, the progress that we've made with the reporting. Anytime that someone has asked for something, it's come through.
Yeah,
It's fantastic. So
I-
it's very, very helpful, and it definitely is appreciated, as well as, some of the updates on all of this with personnel and finances. It's very helpful.
as well as adding some notes to make it easier for us,
That's
including a bigger font, I'm noticing. Gets bigger and bigger every month. Thank you. But, okay, those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay, activity stipend request C. I need a motion to approve the stipend positions of Unified Sports Bowling Advisor and Schaghticoke Allies for Equality, SAFE, Advisor for Schaghticoke Middle School.
So moved.
Second?
And discussion.
I mean, just a comment, I'm happy to see that the Unified Sports Program continues to grow, and I think that's a very valuable activity that our kids get to do.
I concur. Absolutely. And those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. D, the approval of the following curricula. I need a motion to approve the following curricula: Conversational Spanish 1 and Conversational Spanish 2.
Second.
Primary, okay. And discussion? David, and then
Yeah, just
JT?
a quick comment on the conversational Spanish. My son had it last year in 8th grade, and it was impressive to see, compared to my daughter coming through Spanish traditional, this, and he picked up a lot of Spanish. It was surprising. He chose to move to German once he got to high school, but I thought it was a great program.
Okay.
That's
JT?
actually great to hear, David, because even in the presentation, articulating what the difference was, like, what do you mean conversation in
Right.
Spanish? And fleshing that out, and just having a passionate instructor there, kind of sharing those anecdotal stories, so that's
Sure.
even more fuel to, that this is we're targeting a group of students that are able to make amazing progress, and actually, it sounds like, they might actually be making better progress without all the
Right.
grammar in the way. So I was just really pleased to see that we've got that program for the 7th and 8th graders, and the fact that they could take a 7th and 8th grade, and then even if they wanted to pursue Spanish, or even German, yes, right?
They could do that.
Afterwards, right, so I think it's really, it's hitting a nice target audience, so I thank you for that, Alicia.
Thank you. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. And E, textbooks. I need a motion to approve the following textbook: American History, Beginnings Through Reconstruction, grade 8. I'll move that.
I'll second it.
And any discussion?
I have a quick question slash comment. Looking at the total cost for ordering 380 of these, and this is just one textbook out of many that we provide, should we be having discussions of, instead of textbooks, providing tablets of some sort to take the place of these textbooks? I mean, down the road, because it may save us money, or it may be a cost that's similar than what we're doing now. And I'm wondering if we have investigated that, if we have started to look at that, and what results we're finding with doing that.
Can I help you out first and then jump in? Okay. Yes, it's a tremendous amount of money, but we do have many of our books, the software, but please understand, you have to pay a licensing fee for those too. Now, granted, I'm not sure which is more or less or whatever, but I do believe we're moving in that direction. I would suspect this isn't available in that, nor do we have the technology to back it up. I mean, usage for the students. That would be.
There's a couple, that's a long, there's a long, it's a long answer, and the one we talk about a lot, and I don't think it's an either or. And the reoccurring costs, those Chromebooks, tablets, whatever we look at, the shelf life of them, replacement cycle is much faster than a lot of the textbooks. These textbooks do come with an online component. I would say at Scotticoke, for example, we're almost to the point where every student can use a Chromebook while they're in school. Personally, I think I've been part of 2 laptop programs where students bring them home, and that's a very different dynamic, and one that as a community, I think we have to have a lot of conversation over. And it's not the upfront funding, it's the recurring costs over time, and the replacement. And so, as we're entering budget season, as we're facing state cuts, textbooks we're gonna have, once we make this purchase, they're here. If you make a commitment to a Chromebook for a student, that is a 10 or 12 year with a reoccurring every year cost that we're going to build in the budget, just like oil and electricity and everything else. And so again, I think we can have that conversation, but it's a broad conversation.
It would be nice, I guess, to just look at real numbers here. And also, just to understand, an average textbook like this, how long of a shelf life will we get out of it? Because things change and new editions happen, and you do need to upgrade those at some point as well.
That's a great question. So the former textbook was 25 years old. And so as we revised curriculum, which is the process now, we write curriculum and then we'll look for resources. This textbook, they looked at several, but this textbook provided the online component that had a lot of primary sources, which are what are encouraged now with the inquiry model for social studies and also science. So the shelf life on this textbook should be quite long because they're using documents that are historical in nature and can be viewed by students to come up with questions and to do further research that's embedded in our curriculum. So this would be a long-standing purchase. But to go back to your question prior, the curriculum committee, we're taking a look at actually our regulation on textbook adoption. And one of the things that we've agreed to is we would like to do an investigation of what digital content is available as the departments are going through the process of identifying the need for a textbook. So we're going to start moving in that direction of at least having them look at that as an option. And in speaking with, I can only speak for one department at the high school that I've spoken with so far, they're saying that students aren't really in favor of having an online text because they're so used to manipulating the pages and post-it noting and physically having that text in their hand. So it's, there's a little, back and forth there, but we'll continue to investigate it on our end and look at the pros and cons of each and talking to students about it as the years go on.
I'm surprised that book has lasted that long. I would love to see what one looks like.
No, it's not right.
So whose names are on the side.
It's not
Oh,
right.
that's always flying.
Well, we didn't take this lightly. This is a long time and a lot of research.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Anybody else? Sir?
Okay. Is there a discount for the number of books you buy?
So we drive a hard bargain with some of these booksellers because we're purchasing textbooks from them in different areas in the schools.
Okay.
So prior to ordering, I do some negotiation over the textbook price and the online component to see that we're getting the best price, and we look at multiple year licenses for online and try to cut costs where we can before we actually place the order.
The other question I have is this is just out of the box thinking that I do sometimes. Did you ever think of, like, there's a lot of high schools around us, would it be possible to get, like, the social studies departments to agree on a textbook, and then you negotiate from a larger group? I don't know if that's possible. I know teachers like their own textbooks, but I think the way the way education's going and the way finances are going, you just can't be having, new
That's
textbooks.
very rational thought.
I know, the world doesn't work on this.
Very rational thought. And yes, you can expand that into a number of areas. And you'd be absolutely correct.
And the rest have tried to bring together curriculum writing, for example, as a start, but everyone's at a different phase in the process.
Right.
And so it's very difficult to bring neighboring districts together to begin that conversation when they're at different phases. But we're still working towards it. Science, the NGSS is coming up. As soon as the state releases guidance on that, in terms of a curriculum template,
Right.
I'll be speaking to EdAdvance to kind of help garner support from area districts where we could write together as a consortium.
Good idea.
And scale's tough. So, 380 textbooks sounds like a lot. 1,000 textbooks sounds like a lot, but, unfortunately, we're in the state of Connecticut. So even if we purchased, one textbook for every sophomore in high school or every eighth grader in the state, when you compare us to, Chicago
Right.
or Dade County, and so like the kind of volume discounts that actually gain us. Vendors, the state has tried to do some of this in some areas, and some vendors work, but,
Right.
textbooks are actually switching where the textbook cost might be coming down, but the annual licensing for the online subscription
They're gonna make money
is
somehow.
changing.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question here. I see 380 here. Is it eighth grade course?
This is eighth grade,
And
yes.
just, you give us numbers, so I love numbers.
Yeah.
And I just see that the actual here is 343 for number of students.
Yes.
So that difference?
So what they do is when they put the number down on paper, they're looking at a couple of years down the road and will they have enough as time goes on with enrollment change, and also if a book gets destructed, would they have a few copies on hand? This will
Okay.
not be the final number, more than likely, because
Okay.
before placing the order, I'll work with Dr. Longo to make sure that there's only about 5 to 10 extra textbooks rather than however many are placed in here.
Okay.
Because the publisher will have this textbook on hand for many, many years, or we could actually place an order for 5 to 10 more if we needed. We just don't want to order them singly, because it's actually at a higher cost to us when we purchase as part of that bulk number.
Right, and I would just hope that we can try to meet that number as close as possible.
Yes.
With those confines, because another 40 books is, $4,000.
Absolutely, correct.
So,
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. Okay, items for information and discussion. Again, some of these things are the budget drivers to be aware of. Others are, information. So we'll jump right into it. Field trip report. And if you have any questions or comments,
Bob's not here. Why are we doing this?
Poor Bob, his ears are ringing.
and any questions, Mr. Dahl?
Not
All right, thank you. And a review of the tobacco policies. You want
I can
to
start with that.
elaborate, either one of you?
Yeah, well, I can elaborate a
Yeah,
little bit.
please.
So I don't have the policy in front of me right now, but taking a look at the way the policy is written, and I know there's one line we really dug into quite a bit, and looking specifically at the interpretation of what a vaping device is, and how a vaping device with its accompanying cartridge type vessels, let's say, and how those could have different types of material in it. So not only could it just have the vapor, could also be a nicotine delivery device, but it also could have THC,
Right.
which is the active ingredient
Right.
in marijuana. So what happens is, we take a look at something like, and actually the policy had things like roach clips and rolling papers. If you looked at something like that, we would say, well, that seems to be drug paraphernalia because it has a pretty clear intended purpose towards, as drug paraphernalia. And what we have with these devices, some of them are called Juuls, or like they're e-cigarette type devices. They are so small, right? And we wrestle with this in high schools now. This is a very recent thing. They may be the size of a little USB thumb drive, right? And taking a look at that and reinterpreting that device itself, we don't know necessarily what a student is doing with that. So going back to just purely from student safety, and that is paramount. That's the first thing here. And we have policy that's on the books. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to say, here's what these devices can be and may be being used for, right? And how much do we want to make the administration always be on that, piece where they have to say, okay, well, hold on, maybe it was nicotine, or maybe it was just, Swedish fish flavor or bubblegum flavor. The flavors are, it's kind of bizarre. But I think, so you have some kids that might be doing that. You might have some kids that are maybe doing nicotine, and not that we know of any instances here in our district, but there might be students that are, putting other types of materials in their oils and whatnot that are vaporized with this device. So the device itself, it's hard for us to say, well, what is it being used for, until we actually say, oh, a student is caught with it and it's tested, and that's a cost. That's a cost on us. So it sounds to me, I don't actually want to speak for New Milford. I can speak to, our own, the district that I work in. We actually had a board discussion last Thursday night about this, and it's like the largest phenomenon we don't even know about, that adults don't even know about. And it's getting to the point, there's a tipping point of this I see in the school that I'm employed at. And, you have groups of, students going to the bathroom together, and they're not using the bathroom, and I get concerned about that, that it's not only, it's a safety issue, but it's also a distraction to the learning environment. And I look at it from that perspective. And I think it's incumbent upon us to reinterpret what this is and have a larger piece of public information and to get out. And I think Mr. Smith shared with us some of what went out to parents, too. The letters that went out to parents, the Substance Abuse Coalition, talking about how this is an epidemic, that's facing our students and our children. And how can we get ahead of that? How can we be proactive here in New Milford and use the tools in our policy, the language in our policy, to be proactive? So that's where that was part of our discussion. So I hope that encapsulates a little bit of where we are and the why we are for this. And I will not be naive to think there won't be pushback, because we might get that pushback as a community. The community may say, but it's only vaping, right? And I would question, but is it only vaping?
Right, exactly.
Well, I don't think we need to I'm sorry. I don't think we necessarily need to interpret it. I mean, paraphernalia is paraphernalia,
Exactly.
period. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
that's where I was going.
Yeah.
This is coming back to policy for further discussion, is that it, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, this
Because
is the discussion we brought to the
Okay,
full board.
that's why I wanted to take an opportunity, because I was not at policy, and I appreciate it. I totally agree, I do, and I think this is very important. But something that gives me pause is when we use our policies that tend to be a little bit more defined, and we leave something to interpretation. We have to make sure that interpretation is communicated to our staff and our students properly. We can have the best interpretation possible, but if we don't promote it, if we don't make sure our staff is aware of it and our students are aware of it, we don't have a policy that we can quote open and point to exact verbiage and say this is it. So interpretation is, for me, is just really important to continue that message of what we're trying to prevent and how we're trying to make sure that everyone is on board of how we feel about this. So that.
And I think I see this as, stage one was having that discussion at the subcommittee. Stage two is here, but stage 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is getting down to the continuum, or into the community and connecting parents with that, teachers and students ultimately.
I agree.
And I think we did talk about that at policy as well, exactly what you're saying, is to make sure that we are communicating with our community about this, our teachers, our administrators, our parents, our students, about what it is. And
Interpretation has to be consistent.
Absolutely, and I agree with this too, because even though the state has not yet deemed this paraphernalia, they're still calling it tobacco products, we need to look at our own community and what's happening here and take a stand, and I think that's what we're doing here, protecting our students and our schools.
So to date, we've considered a vaping device a tobacco product. Still illegal on school grounds, there's still consequences for it, but historically, the consequences for tobacco are less than that of a controlled substance
Right.
or drug paraphernalia. All parents have these policies as part of parent packets, all students, but to Ms. Fallenbach's point is, we are redefining them, and we don't want to catch anybody off guard.
That's my point.
And we don't want to, kind of move the goalposts on students. And so what we do want to do is open a conversation. We wanted to go through the board and then communicate with parents that these devices will now be seen as drug paraphernalia.
That was my point.
One is to empower parents to have that conversation with their students as to why. Remind them that even if it's just tobacco, that's still illegal on school grounds. And that to give the high school kind of the authority and the middle school the leverage so that it's not a 2-hour detention, but now in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and possibly expulsion for distribution of drug paraphernalia on school grounds. Because to Mr. Shem's point is that I don't think that students understand the either current severity or potential severity of even the nicotine. Some of the cartridges that you can put in have as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So it's not even just the fact that it's a THC potential, it's the degree of harm. And they're ubiquitous. And it's only a matter of time in chemistry before other material is put into that delivery device. It can be adjusted however. And so, we're reinterpreting our policy to meet the needs of our administration and parents. And again, we don't want to move that goalpost without being transparent. And so we sent out the vaping information to inform parents. We've met with staff and helped to educate them, because if I put 7 devices on the table right now, you may not be able to recognize which ones are vaping devices and which ones weren't. And even if you could recognize them tomorrow, you probably can't, because they're being developed now. And so the next step would then be to inform students and parents that this is now kind of considered paraphernalia and make sure they're aware of it. Again, we want to prevent students, not punish students.
Thank you.
Can
Okay.
I add one more thing?
Sure.
This was actually one of the first things that I had asked, 2 years ago, for policy, to put on an agenda. And, at that point, I remember asking Mr. Smith, is this an issue? And it wasn't at that point. But we really had reached so quickly that tipping point. And that's where I feel like it sounds like our schools are, that, again, to be proactive and to get ahead of it. So I don't want us to be reactionary and to chase that. So,
Okay.
thanks.
And as you can see, we have a host of possible budget drivers. I'll let Mr. Smith introduce them, and their possible consequences are, well, go ahead.
So I'll talk briefly about them, because we've addressed them in a little more detail at subcommittee. But the idea being that we recognize there's a very short window of budget deliberations, and one of the challenges as a board member you have is to weigh programmatic changes along with budgetary changes, and to do it at the same time in the same compressed amount of space, and to have a 20-minute presentation from a department to interpret the procedural, policy, structural, staffing changes, and weigh that with budgetary impact. So what we wanted to do is start a conversation and to put some kind of breadcrumbs out there to let you know the kinds of things that we're talking about. Not all of these things will have a direct increase in the budget. These may be offset by other things. We talked a little bit about intervention support. We talked about bilingual staffing. We know that we have to add a bilingual teacher to the district. Our numbers indicate that we need another bilingual teacher. Whether or not that's offset by a cut somewhere else, or whether or not that's an add, I can't tell you yet. But when we get there, that bilingual teacher is going to need. We know, we've talked before, when Mr. Corpo and Mr. Klein did the data presentation, the gap. and kind of our struggling students that we have to address. That's where that intervention support comes in. We've talked about, funding cycles. We know, for example, elementary school playgrounds, for example, we don't have an annual line in our budget to say, every year we're going to spend $700 on new mulch for those playgrounds, or we're going to have, $1,000 repair. We wait until things, kind of to Mr. Tershem's point before about the vaping, we're not proactive in that. We wait till something breaks, then we go to Mr. Monrette and said, oh, we need some wood chips. What else can you reallocate or not do so that we can address this? We want to get ahead of that and put in cycles. The same thing with asbestos. We do asbestos abatement every year. Where that project is and how it's funded comes from kind of the facilities budget. There's not a line that says every year we're going to spend $7,000 in abatement, and here's kind of our 5-year abatement plan. So those are things that may or may not have a impact on the underlying, overall budget increase number. But those are the conversations that we're having now, and kind of we put on the table and say, can we do this cost neutral, or is it going to have an impact? So we want you to be thinking about these things, if you have questions about them, so that it's a little easier to digest when you're sitting here at budget night, looking at numbers and programs at the same time. So if you have any other thoughts or ideas, please, questions and ideas.
Well, just quickly, to these budget drivers, they may not, some of these issues may add to the budget, but your point also, there are other areas that we may have, through these conversations, we can come up with efficiencies and savings.
Absolutely.
They're not necessarily actual budget drivers. We need to be looking at everything. And if we're going to be adding something, we need to prioritize, why are we adding this and what can we possibly move somewhere else? That's just my thought there. I had asked this at operations, and I apologize. I know you answered the question, but it was still a little, the special education structure, what, can you just
Yeah.
give me a little bit more than what you had discussed at operations? It was a little bit confusing for me where you're going on that.
And vague.
Yes, I didn't want to go
You
there,
can say
but
that,
okay.
and it's okay to have that. I mean, special education is about 22% of our budget.
That's why I'm asking.
It serves a lot of students, pre-K through 21. Mrs. Olson and I have a frequent conversation of, does our model and delivery mechanism meet the needs of students, and are there more efficient ways to do that? A couple of years ago, outside of the budget cycle, we brought in that ESS program because we knew that it could address needs of students. We didn't do it necessarily as a cost driver, but it did have offsets in that we have
That's
students
why
that
I'm
are now
asking.
in our district that it's saving us dollars on the one hand, but I would say as important is we're better meeting the needs of our students. So on a very frequent basis, we look at how we're staffed in our special ed services. The number of paras that you looked at tonight, the number of special ed teachers, the students, where those students are, what the needs are. We know the social emotional needs of students are shifting. We know that we have more students with behavioral needs at earlier grade levels, and we're not staffed right now. I would tell you, we're not staffed equitably right now between our 9-12, our 6-12, and our
Got it.
pre-K 5. And so we're looking at, kind of to your point before, creative, as cost neutral as possible solutions. We start, and I'm looking at the people across the table from me on a regular basis saying, what are we doing? Are there better ways for us to do it? The bottom line drivers impact things outside of this, that we can't control. So can we kind of put all the pieces on the table and rearrange them in a better way that is cost neutral or low cost and improves our delivery mechanism? So every department's doing that. In special ed, we have that conversation, and I do suspect that we'll see some shifts. One of the conversations we're having internally now is if it's cost neutral and it's not a budget driver, but it's a programmatic change, do we present it as part of the budget process? Or does that confuse the process, and we should talk about it after the budget process? And I think the answer is probably yes to both. In some cases, some programmatic changes will be part of the budget, and some may show up like that ESS program, although that wasn't a cost-neutral solution, outside of the budget process.
Thank you.
Okay. And item D, the facilities chair asked me to put this on, the Lillis Building ADA report priorities.
I guess if I
Yeah.
can start.
Right.
since I asked for it to be on, and if you were there that night, feel free to chime in with whatever I missed. But I guess what we're looking for is a little direction. We got the ADA report, and the results are we could spend as little as $0 up to like 5 million on that building. And because we are grandfather clause, and with that, as far as ADA compliance, we don't have to do anything to meet ADA compliance, although that's kind of a moral issue, in my opinion, what we do with that. And fortunately, nothing that needs to be immediately attended to at this moment. There's no safety issues in the building, immediate safety issues. But there are some things like a roof that somewhere down the line is gonna cost.
Can you still get a slate roof? I mean, it lasted 100 years. I want one.
I don't know.
Get aluminum.
But somewhere down the line, sooner than later, is gonna run around $300,000 to repair. And I think it's something that we as a board, I think we need to discuss. You know, are we gonna keep, putting spackle on the walls and hoping the dam doesn't burst, or, I'm sorry, I'm editorial. I won't do that. But anyway, so that went out there.
I was sitting in the audience for facilities, and there was a comment that it was important. I just felt that a comment was made that we've paid for this report and we've spent money and we need to really take a look at this. Just my opinion, I don't think, I personally am not prepared to put anything in the operational budget for this building yet, until I would hope that the board would take this report and have conversations with the town as to what we may be doing and where we may be going. And rather than, putting funds out there or designating them towards a building we may be in, we may not be in, we know we're in compliance. It is not a emergency end-all issue. It's a goal that we have in one respect or another. We would like to take a look at this. I think it should be done on a collaborative basis, and taking a look at and having those discussions and going through this coming year. Not that it's not important, it's very important. I personally would also like to focus in on some or more of the educational issues in our curriculum and our budget. That's just me.
I just want to address some of the comments you made. We did touch upon this topic, it was yesterday.
See how quick it can be?
Yeah, we touched upon this yesterday with the mayor-elect and basically said the same thing. We do need some direction, and we can't decide that as a board by ourselves, because something of the magnitude of a roof may require bonding. I don't know. But we certainly need to discuss, what direction as a community we want to go with that. And that's a further discussion. I mean, that would take a lot more involvement with, the members here with direct input as well. So that's where we're at that way. And yes, as far as immediate fixes, but we do know down the road, as with many of our buildings, there are going to be some considerable costs. So that's there. Bill and David.
Well, I just wanted to go back, I think 2 facility meetings ago when this first presented to us. I thought Kevin and Josh said they were going to look at it and kind of make a list of priorities of what you guys feel are the important, and then bring it back to the facility committee. Now, I wasn't there last week, so I don't know if that was done, or if that's being planned to be done.
It was discussed again.
Was it discussed again? Okay.
I just wanted to let the board know, I made it in my chair's report, but I did give the complete ADA analysis to the, yeah, okay.
So I just want to throw one little thing out there since I won't be here for the discussion.
Oh, you can do public comment.
You
Three minutes or less.
So there is, as you all know, what I had been doing for the last few years with Solar City and Tesla, but not with them anymore. But the slate roof for the Tesla tiles is going to be available here in Connecticut probably in the next 18 months. And with something that could be almost, well, the pricing should be about the same price as replacing that slate roof, but it also then comes with free electricity that could potentially power the whole building.
Wow.
So just something to just stick in the back of your mind
But
for
these are the
down the
things
road.
with the new technologies, the new construction, new materials. Yeah, these are all more than a 20-minute discussion. There's no
Yeah.
question about that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating technology.
Yeah, it's one of the first ones they're coming out with because Elon's house, they just did it, he had a slate roof, and so that's one of the first ones available. And the cost is similar when you take the tax credits into consideration and the fact that also you get free electricity and the roof is warranted for the life of the building.
And sometimes they pay you. Do you provide enough power to the grid?
Well, it won't do that. It won't offset the building that much. You'll get a net metering thing where it'll turn the meter backwards for it, but it could take up a significant amount of the building. And, a commercial building like that probably wouldn't cover it all. There's not enough roof space, but, it's a way to offset it where you gotta spend maybe, $200,000-$300,000 for the roof. But if you get electricity for the next 30 years, it kind of balances out, I would say. So just something to stick in your.
We'll make sure that's in the minutes.
And we'll bring them back when we have them.
Yeah, really. Any other questions or comments? Okay, at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn Mr. Littlefield's last meeting at the BOE.
So moved.
There you go.
Second.
And all those in favor? And thank you.
Have a nice Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes.
You too, everybody.
Good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
I can't wait to visit your new establishment.
I was gonna say.